Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and I have a number of book selections to share with you today. These would be great for the month of Ramadan or any time of year, and they are suitable for all audiences, for children and adults as well. Alright, so the first book I want to show you, or rather the first stack, contains the only book that actually pertains to the month of Ramadan. All the other ones have to do about the previous prophet or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or just general information about Islam. So the first book I want to show you is called Ramadan, and this is a really beautifully illustrated picture book. It is a more lengthy picture book, but it contains a lot of information. It goes through the whole day of fasting, talks about all the different things that you might expect to find in a Muslim family, some traditions, and of course like breaking the fast, going to the mosque, and early morning meal before fasting. So a really great picture book that we've really enjoyed over the years. It's a little bit older, so maybe more difficult to find. This one is a little bit more recent. This one's called Golden Domes and Silver Lanterns. This is a Muslim book of colors. This one has illustrations that I don't normally typically like, but they are really charming for this book. I also really like the way that it's been whimsically written and illustrated. And it just goes through a lot of different things that you might find in a Muslim family. And then it's with the whole theme of going through the different colors. So I really enjoy this. My daughter really enjoys it. It's a short picture book. It's just a really nice, lovely book that we've enjoyed as well. All right, The Spider and the Doves. This is a new book for us, and I have to say that I really, really enjoyed it. This is the story of the Hijra. And while the book itself is not the highest quality, and some of the illustrations are okay, the content is amazing, and some of the illustrations are fantastic. And I'll show you the ones that I really like, and then the ones that I'm like not crazy about. So this is the story of the Hijra told by a spider and two doves. Basically, the spider who is interacting with the two doves, and the doves can fly throughout the whole land and bring back information to the spider. And it's a really wonderful way to narrate history and the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the time of Hijra. And then that's when you kind of see the importance of the spider and the spider web in the cave when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was making Hijra from Mecca to Medina. All right, so the illustrations, some of them are super basic and not that interesting. And then you have like these really beautiful paintings that are the background with the foreground being like a black kind of silhouette, which I'm not super crazy about. However, I do want to recreate this image here as a project with the kids. So I am excited to kind of redo this using our own watercolors and then some black construction paper, because I do really like this one quite a bit. Anyway, I highly recommend this book. This is new for us. I really enjoyed it. I love the whole concept of telling a story from the perspective of the doves and the spider. And so, and it's written in a way that if you're not a Muslim family, it's written in a way that you could understand it. And at the very back of the book, it also explains, it has a glossary for, the different names and things that you may not be familiar with if you are not a Muslim family. Okay, Alligator the Green One. This is another book that we really, really enjoy. And we recently used this one with one of our main lesson blocks for grade 1 for the letters of the alphabet. But in general, we just kind of can read it anytime. It doesn't have to be with a main lesson block, and doesn't have to be during the month of Ramadan. I am showing you more books than we're actually going to read in this month. I am going to show you the set in a little bit that we actually read every Ramadan, or at least for the last 4 years. But this book, one of the reasons that I really love it, and one of the reasons why I purchased it in the first place, was because of the illustrations. And so I am a huge fan of beautifully illustrated picture books. Now, I really like the format of a picture book because I feel like it delivers amazing content that is written in, I think, a high quality way, but for a younger audience, which makes an older person or an older child able to understand stuff that maybe they weren't familiar with in a really enjoyable format. So this is the story of Al-Khidr. It was a wise man who, with whom Prophet Musa alayhi salam accompanied during a period in his life, and it goes through these different stories where there are wisdoms for what Al-Khidr did, which were not apparent at the time when Musa alayhi salam was with him. And later when he's like, why did you do this? Or why did you kill that child? Or why did you damage that boat? At the end of the story, then you realize why each of those things happened. And so that is this book. And so the content's amazing, and the illustrations, I just really find them really nice. Something else is that I think it is just the perfect length picture book. It has just enough text with the beautiful illustrations. Sometimes I'm not crazy about the ones that are super long, and I don't mind short ones, but sometimes a super long picture book, when you're expecting it's just going to be like a bedtime story, it takes like a half an hour. Sometimes that happens. Okay, two more books here of the picture book format. The Grand Mosque of Paris. This is a semi-new book for us. It was gifted to me from a friend, and I am so glad that she did. It is based on a true story during World War II, when this particular mosque, which we happen to have visited recently, and then also as a child, I visited when I lived in France. But this mosque was used in order to help Jews escape during the World War II. And so I love that it has history. It's based on, it's a picture book that has historical significance based on real events, and it's also really beautifully illustrated once again. And so this is kind of a heavier picture book. So if you've got a very sensitive child, you might want to pre-read this, or, choose what you want to say as you're reading the story, or maybe have a discussion after the book. This is also a more lengthy picture book. I think this would be great for a unit study on World War II. I think it's great for a unit study on Muslims or on mosques in general. All right, so another highly recommended book. Okay. This is one of my favorite picture books for like this kind of genre. This one's called Yafa and Fatima. This is Shalom and Salam. And this is the story of a Jewish girl and a Muslim girl. And it's so beautifully written. I just love it. It is so evenly balanced. You don't ever feel like there's one particular character who has the upper hand, or who is, more respectable or better in a way. It's just such a beautiful, delightful story. And it goes through, and if you are neither Muslim nor Jewish, then this book would be great to kind of give you a little bit of insight on, say, the celebrations that each religion has, or the books that they read, like the holy book, or just other aspects of the religion. So it's a really delightful picture book. I highly recommend this book. It's one of our favorites. Okay, so let me move into this series right here. This series is one that I purchased kind of recently, and it is the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It comes in this really beautiful cardboard container, very sturdy, really nice. When we typically read these during Ramadan, so when we do, I kind of take them out, I fan them out all onto like a table, or just a place that we're gonna decorate for Ramadan, and then the kids will read them. So let me tell you a little bit more about this series, because I do have a full review of this series, and you can find that link down in the description box below. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it now, and why we read this during Ramadan, how we actually go about that. All right, so it comes with 20 volumes, and each of the volumes it's short, like I think 15 pages, so less than 20 pages. You can also see that the font is really large, and the illustrations are like, okay, they're not like totally awesome, and they're not totally not awesome, but they're cool. They're fine. What I like about this series is that each book is like super easy to get through. If your child knows how to read, I want to say maybe this is 4th or 5th grade level, maybe. I'm not sure. So if your child is at that level and can read, these books, then reading one a day is like totally feasible. So it's a little bit less overwhelming than, say, handing your child like a larger seerah book or biography book and then saying read like 5 pages a day or 10 pages a day. This is like really doable, and the fact that they're small and just kind of portable just makes it a lot easier for the children to get through. All right, so there are 20 books, and so what we do is we'll read one a day. And yes, there are 29 or 30 days in Ramadan, and there's only 20 books, but there's always a day that, things get difficult, or we're hosting, or we're out or whatever. And so 20 books is just perfect for the month of Ramadan. What we'll do is that the children will read it, or I'll read it aloud, but usually I assign this to the children that can already read. Then they will write a written narration summarizing the book into a little journal or notebook. And so we've been doing this every year for about 4 years. Previous to that, we would read the seerah or the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam once a year as a homeschool lesson, and I would read it aloud to all of my children. And then sometimes they would write narrations, sometimes we would just orally review before we moved on. And I would go through different biographies. I didn't always just stick to the same one every year. We would just find different biographies. But then I sort of fell out of that habit, unfortunately. And so this kind of is a nice way to still keep that tradition alive, only we're just doing it during the month of Ramadan. All right, so I'm going to put those aside. I'm going to go to this stack really quickly here. These would be great for just general information about the previous prophets and Islam in general. I want to pull this one aside from it because these are all by the same author, and they are all, like, the covers I'm so not crazy about. Like, this is not inspiring to me at all. But the insides are amazing. Just the kind of illustrations that I love. It's really nicely written. It's written kind of in a story format. It's super easy to get through. It's like a page turner. And so we have Tell Me About Prophet Muhammad. We have Tell Me About Hajj. And so again, same basic feel for each of the books, beautiful illustrations. I feel like an appropriate amount of text to the illustrations. Then we have Tell Me About Prophet Musa alayhi salam. And then Tell Me About Yusuf alayhi salam. And then this one is The Greatest Stories from the Quran. So these are going to be, oh, look at that. That's just super, super gorgeous. I just really, really, really love these. Okay, so if you can find these, because I don't even know if they're still available. If you can, this is another series that I would highly recommend because it's really well written and the illustrations are fantastic. Okay, so in that stack was this book, which I'm like kind of about. I've kind of moved away from using my DK Eyewitness books in our homeschool because this is definitely not written in a narrative format. It's not story format, and these are not illustrations. None of the DK Eyewitness books usually have illustrations. They're usually photographs. And the way that it's written is in a way that you could just open up any 2-page spread and read something, and it doesn't exactly relate to the next section or the previous section. So if you're like, oh, I just need to look up something specific about, maybe it's about Hajj or something about history and travel, or here's merchants and travelers, and then you have the Crusades. You want something just kind of specific. This is a great resource just to kind of get a little bit of information. One of the reasons why I stopped using it is because I felt like we would read it and then just kind of forget. It wasn't something that really kind of stuck with us. The original, or I guess the initial paragraph is short and, gives you enough information. It's great. But then you have all these different captions, which could be a lot of fun. And in theory, I look at this and it seems really interesting. But in reality, when I would use this with my kids, it wasn't very user friendly for the way that I was teaching. So if my kids are sitting around and they're not looking at the photographs, then me talking about each of these different things is going to be a little bit more difficult. And a lot of times they'd be playing or on the floor if they were young and I'd be reading aloud, or they'd be sitting across from me. Maybe they're knitting. So they're not always looking at the photographs or the pictures. And so it didn't work so well. This kind of book is great if you've got a child that just wants to kind of thumb through a book and kind of be kind of inspired by a little something, and then maybe that sparks some curiosity to kind of dive into that particular subject area a little bit more. Maybe a book like this might be helpful. For somebody who finds like a lot of text overwhelming, then these little captions also might be a good way to kind of get a little bit of information without being overwhelmed. So anyway, we have this on hand. We don't use it, but I'm going to always have it on hand because you never know. It might come in like super handy with a particular unit that we're doing, but overall, it's not my go-to book. The ones that we really enjoy are these ones, as well as the stack of picture books that I showed you, and then these ones that we use a lot. So I've got two different series here. The Prophets of Allah series. There are 5 volumes here. We have been using these books for years and years. Now, they are not like my favorite books exactly, but we use them a lot. And here's why. They are written in a really easy manner for children and adults to understand. This is a lengthy picture book, so this is not something where you're just going to, read one book before bed. This is going to take you a really long time. The illustrations, I find them to be kind of mediocre. I'm not crazy about them. Some of them are great, but for the most part, I've never been really crazy about these illustrations. But one thing I do want to point out is that for the illustrations, they have been really careful to, for the most part, adhere to some more conservative views on what you can and cannot illustrate as far as like from the Islamic perspective. So you'll find a lot of things that don't have people in them. And I think there are different illustrators for each of the books, because some of them won't show faces at all. Let me try to find one where it doesn't show, for the humans, it doesn't show faces. Like you'll see a lot of things where they avoid drawing humans. And then if you do, like in this case, you can't really see, they're more like a silhouette. And then they will have animals, but you can see like they're very, conscious of just being more having a more conservative view of what you can and can't illustrate. And then let me see if I can actually find some pictures of people, because I know that there are some, and I like the way that they kind of left them faceless. Like you can't really see them. So if that was a concern for you, then this would be a good series of books. All right. So, there is one thing, okay, here are like actual, faces, but also the illustrator here is different than the one here and different than the one here. So just want to point that out. Okay, so what I don't like about this series, I don't want to say what I do or don't like specifically about this next thing that I want to say. What it does is that I feel like it takes some liberties in how it portrays a particular story. So it's really good about referencing Quranic ayahs for where these stories came from, where these previous prophets were mentioned. They are mentioned in the Quran, and there's always citation about which verse and chapter, which surah and ayah those stories came from. But then these are like really lengthy stories. You might just have an ayah, like a sentence or two mentioning a particular situation, but then they've got like this whole, sort of embellished story, but not quite. Let me explain that. So the thing is that there's a lot of scholars who are going to come in and really explain the context of those ayahs. But then as well, you've got storytellers who are also going to add scenery and weather and emotions to the people involved to, again, give it context. Now, you may be completely opposed to that and say, well, that was not in the Quran, so you can absolutely not do that. You don't know whether, if it was a hot day, if they were feeling hot or tired or scared or thirsty. You can't really say that. I, however, don't mind it to an extent. And I feel like you do need to provide, if for a storybook, you do need to provide some context to those ayahs. Otherwise, they're just gonna go in one ear and come out the other. So there's that, which you can decide whether you're okay with that or not. The other thing that was something that my father actually pointed out was that there are times when the author will say things, and you might disagree with this. It says, before there was anything else, there was Allah. Then Allah decided to create the universe we know. So instead of decided to, it's just Allah created. When you use words like, oh, and then, he decided to do this, and then he thought he'd do that, it kind of reduces the majesty of a creator down to something like more human. And so, again, you may not feel the same way, but while reading through this book with my father, he went and made notes, and that has just stayed with me all these years and has just kind of created this image in my head that as I read it in the other books, I'm just conscious of just omitting those words as I'm reading it to my children. Okay, so on to these last two books. These are Good Night Stories from the Quran and Good Night Stories from the Life of Prophet Muhammad. These are both by Good Word. These both have, in my opinion, really nice, simple illustrations. Not super fantastic, but definitely not like these, which I was not crazy about. It's written in a really simple manner. This one is, let me go into the seerah real quick. This is a great introduction to the seerah, or to the a biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for children. I just really enjoyed it. I think it gives enough information without being too heavy, and it's written in a way that I think both children and adults would really enjoy. What I love about homeschooling multiple age groups is that I could read this to my daughter who is 8, and my 12-year-old will still enjoy it. But if I sat down with my 12-year-old son and read this to him, he might be like, well, that's kind of seems juvenile. So this kind of book works amazingly well with multiple ages, multiple grades, multiple levels. You can read it to a child who doesn't know how to read. You can also read this as an adult, as a refresher. And I think it's also great for all audiences as well. All right, so I think that sums it up. I would love to hear your favorite picture books. If you wouldn't mind leaving them down in the comment section below, I would so appreciate it. And I think that other people would also appreciate it as well. If you want a complete list of all of these books, you can find them on my website at pepperandpine.com. That link is down in the description box below. And if you want to see what we're up to on a daily basis, don't forget that you can find me on Instagram at pepperandpine.